Kia ora everyone, welcome to this webinar on the summary of feedback from the public consultation on the New Zealand taxonomy. My name is Jess, I lead the taxonomy work for the Centre for Sustainable Finance. CSF provides the secretariat function and stewards the process of the taxonomy development. Just a quick reminder about the taxonomy project to start us off. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So one more slide. And this phase of work to develop the taxonomy criteria began in late 2024. And the focus is to develop climate change mitigation, adaptation and resilience criteria for the agriculture and forestry sectors. Just a note that the adaptation and resilience criteria are still in development and will be shared in draft form for consultation shortly. In the context of New Zealand, it was really important that we included both transition activities under the mitigation criteria and adaptation and resilience criteria to extend our taxonomy beyond an emissions reductions only focus. In 2024, at the 2x2, it was agreed that there should be strong alignment between the New Zealand and the Australian taxonomies, and that has informed our development approach. Next slide, please. So, a taxonomy is simply a list of activities that can support an environmental goal with associated performance criteria. It is not a tax. However confusingly named, the word taxonomy means classification system. It classifies environmentally sustainable activities. It does not restrict access to finance. Its purpose is to provide one set of useful information for investors who might be interested in sustainable investments. It's comparable to the energy rating that you might see when you buy a new washing machine. If energy efficiency is important to you, you will look at that rating and factor it into your decision making. It doesn't force you to buy any washing machine or stop you from buying any other machine, and it doesn't force washing machine manufacturers to do anything. It's just credible information to give confidence to those who are interested in energy savings. Next slide, please. So why are the Centre for Sustainable Finance supporting the development of a New Zealand taxonomy? New Zealand relies heavily on international capital, and our export industries also rely heavily on access to global marketplaces and customers. Around the world, taxonomies are being developed as the common language between businesses and investors on environmental issues. As you can see on this map here, more than 50 jurisdictions are working on taxonomies. For investors that are interested in funding green or transition projects, or global markets or customers who have sustainability reporting requirements, taxonomies provide clear, credible information and reduce greenwashing risks. By lowering the risk and friction, the idea is that they should increase capital flows and decrease associated costs. If we didn't build a New Zealand-specific taxonomy, we risk that taxonomies that are being developed in the EU, China, Singapore, Brazil, being applied to New Zealand businesses and not being fit for purpose. Or, and worse, we risk that global investors for whom New Zealand is an optional market skip over us, or we risk adding difficulty for exporters to access global markets. Next slide, please. To be crystal clear, the taxonomy is and has been designed as a voluntary framework. In the few jurisdictions globally where taxonomies are mandatory, the mandatory element applies to reporting. So financial institutions might be required to report on what percentage of their book is taxonomy aligned. No one is required to do any of the activities in the taxonomy, and there are no restrictions on who can get finance. Next slide, please. So that is your refresher of some of the key points about the New Zealand taxonomy. Now let's look at the recent consultation. Next slide, please. So the Technical Experts Group, the TEG, who oversee the whole taxonomy development, and the Sector-Specific Technical Advisory Group, the TAG, have worked on the draft criteria for mitigation activities from December of 2024 through to April of this year. And we started this process with reviewing global taxonomies in key jurisdictions, including Australia, the EU, Singapore. And these working groups have looked at what needed to be adapted to make the internationally accepted criteria fit for purpose in New Zealand. Through this process, the TEG and TAG found that they needed some additional technical working inputs on various aspects of the criteria, which meant that we engaged a further 21 organisations on those specific issues. As well as that, the Centre for Sustainable Finance reached out to a further 78 relevant organisations, including industry bodies and key players in agriculture and forestry, environmental NGOs, the finance sector and Māori organisations. We offered briefings and Q&A sessions and options for early input on shaping the activities and measures that should be included in the mitigation criteria. All of this has culminated in the first draft of mitigation criteria that then went to public consultation so that a wider range of views and inputs could be heard. Next slide, please. The consultation ran for 4 weeks. It was widely promoted through the Centre for Sustainable Finance channels and direct outreach to key respondents, including agriculture and forestry peak bodies and key players. Submissions could be made via an online survey or via direct written response to the Secretariat or in consultation calls. Next slide, please. So let's have a look at the feedback. Next slide, please. We received a total of 48 responses, 29 of which represented organisational collective views and 19 of which represented personal views. I want to note that the Australian Taxonomy second consultation received 200 submissions consulting on 6 sectors simultaneously. So given the size of the country and also the importance of the agricultural and forestry sector, we think we're about right for the number of responses received. Consultation feedback was received from across a range of sectors, as you can see listed there. Parallel to the consultation process, feedback was also received from relevant government ministries and services, and we had several meetings where feedback was provided verbally and has been folded into the process. Next slide, please. Because of the density of the criteria, we divided our consultation by the various components of the taxonomy, allowing respondents to respond on the components that were of most relevance to them. And we saw responses as you would expect, with the finance sector primarily responding on use and purpose, the industry bodies and real economy participants primarily responding on the relevant substantial contribution criteria, and NGOs focused on methodology and substantial contribution criteria. Next slide, please. Right, so the vast majority of the feedback received was qualitative, so I'm going to give an overall summary of the sentiment of each sectors as some of the key issues that they responded on. So organisational responses, particularly from the finance sector, the standard setters and environmental certification bodies, were generally positive. There was very strong support for the development of common language, common definitions and criteria to help guide capital towards transition in a way that reflects New Zealand's local context. These organisations also expressed support for interoperability with other jurisdictions to reduce barriers to capital flow and minimise costs. There was also strong support for how the New Zealand taxonomy has included both green and transition activities in order to reflect the realities of hard-to-abate sectors like agriculture and ensure access to transition finance. Next slide, please. In the agricultural sector, respondents expressed a mix of opposition and conditional support. Objections were expressed by all individual respondents from this sector and 2 organisations. Objections often stemmed from misunderstandings about the taxonomy's purpose, believing that it would impose a tax on farmers and foresters or restrict their access to finance. Others questioned New Zealand's participation in the Paris Agreement or denied the existence of human-induced climate change. Some oppose the taxonomy from this sector due to fears that it intends to become mandatory, which we've addressed already. Others had a better understanding, but really stressed the importance of alignment with existing industry frameworks and ensuring the taxonomy remains practical, grounded, and doesn't increase burden on farmers and foresters. For example, it was highlighted to avoid the use of sector-wide emissions averages that might not reflect the diversity that exists within New Zealand's agricultural sector. Next slide, please. Forestry sector representatives and experts went straight to offering valuable technical feedback, particularly on the definitions of forestry and land conversions, as well as in the substantial contribution and specific do no significant harm criteria. There were concerns from these experts that the criteria take too narrow a mitigation focus, overlooking ecological risks or missing co-benefits. They also questioned whether almost all forestry activity categories should have the potential to receive green categorizations. So in the revisions, we're looking at protections to make sure that forestry is suitable, well managed, and well sited. Next slide, please. Environmental NGOs primarily expressed concern that the taxonomy is, by its current design, falling short of driving truly transformational change in industries like agriculture, and instead incrementally improves business as usual. Next slide, please. In consultation, we also asked some general questions about use and expansion of the taxonomy. Stakeholders from other sectors beyond agriculture and forestry responded to show interest in having criteria developed for their industries and being involved in the process. There was strong support across all respondents for streamlined guidance and tailored criteria for SMEs, and emphasis on implementation and use. When considering expanding the scope of the taxonomy in the next phases of development, most agreed that sector expansion, so into other sectors aside from agriculture and forestries, should take priority over developing additional environmental objectives criteria for the agricultural and forestry sectors. Okay, next slide, please. So what are we doing with this information from here? Next slide, please. So all the concerns and revisions for the taxonomy have been analysed. The TEG and TAG have now, for the past month and through August, been workshopping through changes to address the feedback. We also identified in the responses that there was a need to consult further on the whole farm transition activity development. And over the last week, we've met with a further 7 industry bodies and players to explore in detail the proposed approach for this criteria development. And we will continue to do this as we build out these criteria. Next slide, please. These are the key issues that are currently under live consideration with our TEG and TAG based on the consultation feedback. These include consideration to ensure activities are making substantial contributions to climate change mitigation, developing some additional activities to be considered for inclusion in the criteria that were missed in the first draft, review of some of the thresholds that have been proposed, streamlining the process for new technologies inclusion, ensuring that the do no significant harm criteria are indeed protecting against perverse outcomes from emissions reductions actions, and streamlining the use of verification mechanisms as well as guidance for SMEs. These are live conversations with the working groups, so I can't comment yet on where they will land on the resolution of these, but these are the areas of revision that are happening to the criteria currently. Next slide, please. Okay, what happens next? Moving on to the next slide. So as we've said, we're working through the revisions to the climate change mitigation criteria currently. And at the same time, there's ongoing development work on climate change adaptation and resilience criteria, which will expand the scope of the taxonomy aligned activities to include activities that are increasing adaptive capacity or resilience in operations without requiring a substantial reduction in emissions. The second consultation period will open in September, and that will be primarily for the adaptation and resilience criteria. The best way to be notified about a consultation opening is to sign up for the Centre for Sustainable Finance newsletter, which you can do on our website. There are also 2 more periods of quality assurance review of the process following the development of the criteria, which will be undertaken by the Council of Financial Regulators Climate Subgroup. And we're looking to deliver the final report with all of the criteria by the end of the year. So that is the timeline from here. We really encourage you to continue to engage with the process, to provide your feedback and inputs as the mitigation criteria is revised and as the adaptation and resilience criteria is consulted on, so that we can make sure that these criteria will serve their intended purpose and be fit for purpose in New Zealand. I want to say thank you all very much for joining us today. A replay of this webinar, along with the summary of feedback presented from the first public consultation, will be available for you to review on the CSF website by the end of this week. And as always, you can reach out to the Secretariat by emailing taxonomy@sustainablefinance.nz anytime. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you.